All right. Good morning, everybody. I apologise to cricket lovers in the room. I know that just down the road at the Oval, something rather important's going on. But we think week 3 of our Lawless Britain campaign is quite important too. I definitely think that we've caught the mood of the country with this campaign. All sorts of arguments over statistics, but what is beyond doubt is that there is a very strong and growing perception in the country that something is wrong all the way through from policing on the streets, right through the courts and all the way to the prison system. For us, one of the good things has been the number of new people that we've managed to attract to the campaign, a couple of whom will be joining us, or are joining us today. There is certainly rising public anger out there in the country. As you can see, the number of protests that are taking place outside migrant hotels up and down the country is indeed evidence of that. And increasingly, the migrant hotel issue has moved really from one of fairness, why on earth have people been given all these things, to very much about the safety of women and children. For all the government's talk about protecting children, which they claim is the sole purpose of the Online Safety Act, our criticisms of that and the impositions on free speech that have been imposed just in the first week of its operation have led to them sinking to the depths. I would suggest that comparisons that somehow we're siding with Jimmy Savile were wholly inappropriate at every way. But what we will today be talking about is a cover-up. A cover-up that in many ways is reminiscent of what happened after the Southport killings last year. I will say to all broadcasters when we get to this segment of today's press conference, nothing we say will in any way be in contempt of court. And indeed, to quote Jonathan Hall KC, who is the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, he said in the wake of Southport that we should spell out the basic and sober facts. And that's exactly what we will do today. But before we get to that segment, I want to introduce you to some people that have joined us and are joining our campaign. Rupert Matthews is the Police and Crime Commissioner for Leicestershire. Formerly, he served in the European Parliament as a member there. He's twice been elected as a Conservative, but today he comes across to us as our first Police and Crime Commissioner. Rupert.
Thank you.
And welcome on board.
Thank you. Well, morning everyone. Now, I've known Nigel off and on for several years, so I asked him what he wanted me to say to you all today. Great man that he is, he said, you can say anything you like, he said, so long as you tell them why you're joining Reform. So here goes. I joined the Conservative Party in 1984, that's over 40 years ago. I joined a Conservative Party that was putting Britain first, that put the British people first, and that championed freedom. The economic decline of the 1970s was overturned, the Falklands were liberated. But now our great country faces new challenges and new dangers. As Police and Crime Commissioner for Leicestershire and Rutland, I daily face the fight against crime. I see ordinary, hard-working people burgled, robbed and mugged. Shoplifting is getting out of control. Antisocial behaviour is turning too many of our town centres into an apocalyptic wasteland of lawless Britain. Now, I've got nothing but admiration for our police officers and PCSOs. They're doing a fantastic job, but they're fighting crime with one hand tied behind their back. The courts impose sentences that too often are derisory. And Labour's early release scheme means that crooks are back out after serving a fraction of their time in prison. And that's all because our prisons are full. They're full of foreign criminals who should be deported the day they are convicted, not kept here at the expense of British taxpayers. It's no wonder that criminals do not fear the justice system, no wonder that the law-abiding have almost given up on reporting crimes. And our wonderful police officers are let down even by their own senior commanders. The National Police Chiefs Council recently sponsored the abomination that is the Police Race Action Plan. That concluded that people should be treated differently depending on which ethnic group they came from. That is a disgrace and the very epitome of two-tier policing. We need to cut the dark heart of wokeness out of our criminal justice system and allow the police and courts to get back to what they're supposed to be doing, which is keeping our communities safe. But it's not just crime and policing where the old regime is betraying the British people. Immigration, free speech, net zero, the Mauritius deal, a government-facing bankruptcy, all of this foisted on the British people without their consent by woke tyrants convinced that they know best for the rest of us. Governments of all parties have played their role in the decline of Britain. It's almost as if they've looked at countries like Lebanon and Libya, the policies that have led to them becoming failed states, and thought, that looks good, let's try that here in Britain. Now, Kemi Badenoch's recent shadow cabinet reshuffle was her chance to set the Conservative Party course for the future, to put together a dynamic team to make the changes that this country needs. Instead, she brought back a man who can't even commit to leaving the European Court of Human Rights. Her reshuffle reminded me of nothing so much as when Edward Heath turned his back on Selsdon Man, a cowardly capitulation to establishment orthodoxies that led Britain to disaster. But there is a choice. There's a better choice, and he sat right over there. Now, I was in the European Parliament with Nigel. I saw the daily abuse, sneering and contempt that was heaped on him by the great and the good. But Nigel didn't cave in. He had a vision of Britain free of the European Union, and against all the odds, he achieved that. Today, he has a clear vision of Britain free of the tired, old regime, and he has got the courage to deliver that vision. The self-serving, self-entitled liberal elite who have let our country down time after time after time are now on notice. Their day is almost done. Be they Conservative or Labour governments, everyone knows our politicians have failed us all. They have let this country down. They have let the British people down. Enough. Now it is time for reform. Thank you.
Richard, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I did say he was Police and Crime Commissioner for Leicestershire. I forgot Rutland. My apologies to Rutland, who often feel left out. Now, I'm now going to introduce you to Vanessa Frake, former Governor of HMP Wormwood Scrubs, Sunday Times best-selling author. But actually, I'm not going to do the introduction. Colin Sutton will do the introduction. Colin was with us last week and announced he was setting up a task force, a law and order task force, and I'll let him do the introduction.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you. Good morning again. 7 short days since I was last here and introduced. I've been astounded by the breadth and depth of support that I've had coming from quite unexpected sources, and it just shows me how much there is behind this party, behind this movement, really. It comes today for me to introduce the first of the task force members. Many of those messages of support I've had are from people, good people, who want to help, and I'm sure that some of those will be being brought on board in the coming days and weeks. But the first of those is sitting here to my left. Now, when we govern, and we will, we'll fix the police. We will. But that will be in vain if we don't fix the rest of the criminal justice system. And another important strand of that system is prisons. Prisons have had, you know, like everything else, 14 years of underinvestment. We don't have enough prison space now. What's the Labour answer to it? Let's let thieves and robbers and domestic abusers out after they've served 30% or 40% or 20%, whatever percentage it is this week of their sentence. to create space. That will not be the reform way. We can make a start by making sure that the 10,000 plus foreign criminals who are clogging our prisons are deported. And what about the ECHR, you say? That noise you hear is human rights lawyers thumbing through Bentley catalogues. They're going to have to take up shipping or wills and trusts because the ECHR will be no more. That is our policy, and that won't get in the way of making this space with these people. Vanessa, welcome.
Thank you.
Vanessa was 27 years in the prison service,
Correct.
retired as a governor,
Yes.
got an MBE for your services to the prison service,
Yeah.
and more importantly, has shared a stage with me on more than one occasion at true crime conferences and so forth. And I cannot say how delighted I am. Vanessa gives us not only the experience of her time in the prison service, but as Nigel said, she's an author, she has a great knowledge of criminology, of crime, how crime works, and I'm sure that her contribution to the task force will be brilliant, and we'll have some fun doing it as well, like we always do, Vanessa, won't we? Thank you. We're going to show a video now.
My name's Vanessa Farage. I am a former prison governor and author. I started my career in the prison service in 1986 as an officer and worked my way up to governor. I worked at various prisons around London and finished my career off in 2013 at HMP Wormwood Scrubs. For decades I managed violent offenders, gang leaders and murderers. Our prisons are at crisis point. We have reached the situation where consistently governments have bled our prisons dry. If you are soft on crime, what happens is those prisoners are released into our communities, and our communities bear the brunt of criminality. Consistently, successive governments from Labour and the Tories have failed our prison system. They have failed to invest. They have cut corners at every single level. They have released untold prisoners, going back to when Jack Straw was Home Secretary under Tony Blair. I'd like to see Britain that we can be proud of, and I would like to see Nigel Farage lead that campaign. Britain is lawless. Britain needs reform. Good morning, everybody. As the video says, my name is Vanessa Farage. I am a retired prison governor. I was the governor of HMP Wormwood Scrubs for 4 years, and I served in the prison service for 27 years. I'm here today to announce that I am officially joining Reform UK and will work with Colin Sutton and others on Reforms UK's Law and Order Task Force. I'm not a traditional politician. I've never been a member of any political party. I've actually had a real job working within our prison service, ensuring criminals are locked up, the public are kept safe, and prison officers are protected. When I started at Wormwood Scrubs, I was assigned the task of cleaning up D-Wing. D-Wing was the lifer wing. It was the worst of the worst, where the lifers spent their time. It was dirty, run down, and had major drug issues. My attitude to the task was assertive and no nonsense. That's the approach that I will take for my role within Reform UK. In 1986, I joined the prison service. I was proud of my job, and I was proud of my service, and I still am. But now, seemingly, everything we hear is negative about the entire justice system. Successive governments, Conservative and Labour, have driven the prison service to its knees through lack of investment, support, and an unwillingness to allow people who know what they are doing to get the job done. The public's confidence in our prison and justice system has been entirely lost. Prison escapes risen by 30% in the last year. Attacks on prison officers are at record highs. There were more than 10,500 assaults on prison staff in the last year alone. Incidents of drug fines in our prisons risen by 25%. Incidents of weapons have risen by 12%. Incidents of mobile phone fines have increased by 14%. Our prisons are in a crisis caused by Labour and the Conservatives. What have the solutions been? They've let 10,000 prisoners out of jail early. To let criminals out of jail before they even serve their full sentence is a disgrace. They have ignored the concerns of the police, probation, prison officers and the public, whose communities will bear the brunt of criminality. Establishment politicians have pretended as if Britain isn't lawless. We all know it is. We see it on a daily basis, rampant criminality on the streets, repeat offenders facing little consequences, and our towns and cities become increasingly unsafe. Successive governments have appeased prisoners such as Axel Rudakabana, the Southport killer, Hashim Abedi, the Manchester Arena bomber, allowing them the freedom to cook their own meals. Why should dangerous murderers and terrorists have this right? A right that they can then use to attack prison officers by throwing hot cooking oil over them and creating improvised blades to stab them with. It's abominable. I would like to see a government that grabs the bull by the horns, and I believe Reform UK, with Nigel Farage as Prime Minister, would be that government. He is the leader this country needs to make Britain a safer and more secure place to live. Let's back the prison service and support them. I want prison officers to be able to do their job without fear of being attacked, and for their families to know that they will get home safe every day. I want a tougher prison regime for prisoners who will never be rehabilitated. I look at the supermax prisons in America, and I'd like to see a version of that replicated in Britain. And for the prisoners who won't serve life sentences, well, let's try and make a real effort at rehabilitation and release them back into the communities to be more useful members of society upon that release. That will be my focus on our task force. That is my background and experience, and it is only right that I look to improve the prison service and ensures it runs as I ran my prison when I was a governor. Reform UK, I believe, can help make that a reality and restore law and order to Britain. Britain is lawless, and Britain and our justice system needs reform, and I'm very much looking forward to being a part of it. Thank you.
Excellent, and welcome. Well, Vanessa, thank you, and it is indeed a very, very sorry tale what is going on in our prisons. Now, I've been wondering for over a year whether the truth was being withheld from the British public. It is not, as I've stated already, in any way at all a contempt of court for the British public to know the identity of those who allegedly have committed serious crimes. I felt that in the wake of the Southport attacks, and I feel that ever more strongly today. You would have seen a story that broke in the Mail on Sunday concerning events in Warwickshire over the course of the last few days. And we're joined today by Councillor George Finch. He's the leader of Warwickshire County Council, who is going to share with us the sorry tale. George.
Good morning all. This is a story that shocked us all. On the 26th of July, Ahmed Malakil was arrested and then charged later on the 27th of July. I was made aware of this incident on Tuesday, July 29th. I will be looking into why I wasn't informed immediately. The following day I contacted the council CEO to inform her that I wished to speak to Warwickshire Police to urge them to release the immigration status of the criminal. The thing is, I was begging for this to be released. Screaming, phoning, asking it to be released. I sent an email, afternoon, Monica, the CEO of Warwickshire County Council. After hearing the news and reading your email regarding the 12-year-old girl who was raped by an asylum seeker who lives in a HMO in Stockingford in Nuneaton, my hometown, I think transparency is needed, and the people of Nuneaton and the wider Warwickshire area have a right to know who the man is and his background. How can we work with Warwickshire Police to ask them to release the information regarding the details of this man? This is a deep-rooted issue regarding HMOs housing illegal immigrants that are affecting our communities. So I urge you to work with me as Warwickshire County Council leader to ensure Warwickshire Police can release the information to the public in the appropriate manner. I then later phoned the Police and Crime Commissioner for Warwickshire, who informed me that he was on holiday and that he doesn't know much about the case. I was sickened by those comments. Anyone can pick up a phone and speak to me, speak to the CEO, speak to the Chief Constable. And then on Saturday, the 2nd of August, I was informed by the CEO of Warwickshire County Council that a second man, Mohammed Kabar, has been arrested and charged with kidnap, strangulation, and aiding and abetting the rape of a girl under the age of 13. It was at that point that I wrote a letter to the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper and the Chief Constable of Warwickshire Police Alex Franklin Smith, in which I called for all immediate release of the immigration status of the two men. I've urged them to work with me as leader of Warwickshire County Council, and I will be working with all the borough councils and the district councils within Warwickshire to fight against these HMOs that are being put up to house illegal immigrants, and the hotels are in Warwick District Council. And I want to say to all reform councillors and all councillors in the country that this has to stop. Our communities are at a breaking point, and that's why we need reform to change things. We're the last line of defence against the blob, the cover-ups of the councils, and we have to fight every step of the way against this blob, and this is what we're doing on Warwickshire County Council. It has to stop. A 13-year-old girl has been raped by 2 asylum seekers, and I was told that if I released this, I would be in contempt of court, and that I cannot release this due to this phrase, community cohesion. That's the problem. They're trying to cover up the minority, the people that are coming over on boats illegally, and the people of Nuneaton are hurt. They've had enough, and that's why I'm urging all council leaders from all parties to join me in campaigning to stop the housing of illegal immigrants in HMOs with Serco and the illegal immigrants in hotels. That's all I've got to say on this matter today. So thank you, and I'll pass back on to Nigel.
George, thank you very much indeed, and well done for exposing the truth. Threatened, basically threatened, and told the public do not deserve to know the truth. It is absolutely disgraceful. In fact, it has shades of the same mentality at local level that led to Rotherham and the huge shock, not just we as a country, but the international community, who could not believe we'd sunk to those depths. Turning a blind eye, not telling the British public the truth. Well, when it comes to protecting children, we're not hiding behind a flawed piece of legislation. We genuinely intend to protect, in particular, women and children. And I made this point 2 weeks ago, but I'll make it again today. None of these young, unidentified males that are coming into this country should be free to roam the streets. They should be detained ahead of them being deported. And that is absolutely what we stand for as a party, and we mean it. And we'll do that to protect the British people. We have simply had enough. Okay, moving on. I have a list of questions. Let us start with Henry Zeffman, BBC.
Thank you very much. Can I just take you back to something you said right at the start? You talking about the government and the Online Safety Act, and you said they claim that protecting children is the sole purpose of the Online Safety Act. So you seem to think there is a real hidden purpose. What is that?
Well, if it was to protect children, why on earth would an elite police force be set up to monitor what people say online about events such as what's occurred in Warwickshire just last week? Why on earth are we seeing the extent to which online material has been censored, including, I was hearing this morning, even historical comments about Richard III? I mean, this is the beginning of state censorship. It is very worrying and very frightening. As for the intended purpose of the Act, a process begun by the Conservative Party, fully understandably, because of suicide kits being available online and all of these terrible things. Yes, of course, the original intention of the Act was honourable and correct in every way, and we would stand behind it. The trouble is that I suspect most 13-year-olds are more tech-savvy than the Science Minister, Peter Kyle, because they simply go to VPNs where they can't just access what's on the web, they can even quite easily find themselves in the even deeper and darker recesses of the dark web. Do we want legislation that protects children? Yes. We're going to have to find a tech solution to it. The government is not there with it. Thank you. Catherine Foster, GB News.
Jess Phillips, the Safeguarding Minister, has doubled down basically on that message from last week and said that you would enable modern day Jimmy travels. What is your response to that comment and to Jess Phillips in particular around safety of women and girls?
Well, Jimmy Savile, of course, famously was never online, ever. Never owned a computer, never went on the web. So that's an inappropriate comparison. It's also just sinking to the gutter of politics to make that comparison. I repeat the point. We would love to see legislation, effective legislation, that protected young children from harmful and dangerous material. This Act does not do that, and this Act then extends right into the area of free speech. And when you think it's only the 25th of July when it actually came into being, the effects, I would suggest, are chilling already. And I would say to Jess Phillips, why don't we have a proper debate? Why don't we debate the Online Safety Act publicly? Why don't we debate whether this does actually protect minors, whether it does protect children? We'd be very, very happy to engage in that. We'd very happily work with them on trying to find tech solutions that work. But I'm not going to sink to their level of abuse. I'm just not. Shihab Khan from ITV.
Shihab Khan from ITV News. The government has released a range of new measures, both over the weekend and today, that they say is intended to try and stop these crossings from punishing those posting on social media, advertising channel crossings, and reforming the asylum system and the appeals process. I suspect you'll be very critical of that, but what would you do instead if you were empowered to get the backlog down and to stop those crossings from happening?
Well, the big story is they're going to spend £100 million on this. Wow. We've given the French £800 million already. And every calm day, we see the French Navy escorting vessels literally from the beaches of Gravelines or wherever it may be to the Midway line. And yes, you can employ more officers and you can do whatever you want and you can put more border force boats in the channel and more drones and spotter planes in the sky. And you can speed up the asylum process. Easy. Just wave everybody through. In fact, from Sudan, Eritrea, countries like that, that's pretty much what we do already. None of this stops people coming. Why do people come? They come because they know they have an over 99% chance of staying. They come because they know they will be looked after, 3 square meals a day, free dental care, free health care, 49 quid a week pocket money, and while they're at it, probably work illegally, either in delivery services or drugs or whatever it may be. There is only one way you're going to stop this. There is only one way you're going to stop this. Australia went through these agonies back in the earlier part of this century, where they argued at election after election what to do. They tried offshore processing and many other things, and still the boats came. In the end, they towed the boats back to Indonesia. We will make it absolutely clear, as Colin has said already, that the ECHR, whatever its good intentions in the post-war world were, is no longer fit for purpose in any way at all, and we will be free to detain those. And by the way, all around the world, if you enter a country illegally, you will be detained and deported. This is what normal countries do all over the world. We've surrendered normality to this new human rights regime. So if you come to Britain via that route, you will never be given refugee status. You will never be given permanent leave to remain. You will not be free to walk the streets, as so many have done that have committed some of these vile crimes, and you will be deported. And that's the message, plain and simple. And you know what? Within 2 weeks, you won't see a single migrant boat. They won't come. Okay, we have got Sky News. Mari.
Mari Aurora, Sky News, thank you. First of all, on the prisons subject, what is your plan to tackle the mental health difficulties in the prisons? You cannot separate mental health treatment and a lack thereof, perhaps, in prisons with the criminal justice system and the prison population. So what are your plans to actually deal with some of the mental health crises that are happening in prisons? And if I may, is this Project Fear? Are you trying to make people afraid and trying to steer them into fear, and therefore that is the way you will get them to vote for you?
No, they are afraid. They are afraid. I dare you to walk through the West End of London after 9 o'clock of an evening wearing jewellery. You wouldn't do it. You know that I'm right. You wouldn't do it. And that's just in London, let alone what's happening in so many other parts of the country. And the genuine fears that mothers have, particularly for teenage kids, when we know already that an Afghan male has a 22 times more likely chance of being convicted of rape than somebody born in this country. The fact that 40% of sexual assaults in London over the course of the last 5 years have been committed by those born overseas. You know, we have to recognise something. There are some people who come from certain cultures that pose a danger to our society. It's as simple as that. As for our prisons policy, well, I mean, goodness gracious me, why don't you give us a chance? We're just setting up the task force to work these things out, unless you'd like to comment on that mental health problem.
Look, it is a fact there are a lot of people within our prisons who do have mental health issues. Thankfully, with the introduction of in-reach and outreach, things have got better. They're not right at the moment. There are issues with people being able to protect themselves and being put in prison, but what else do you do with them? And that is something that hopefully our task force will work through. But yes, I absolutely agree that there are a lot of people in prison with serious mental health issues because they've been put there because there's nowhere else, or people don't know what to do with them.
Thank you very much. Anya Pott from Channel 4 News.
You say migrants in hotels should be deported.
Mm-hmm.
Where should they be deported to if their country isn't safe or if another country won't accept them?
I'm sorry, I've had enough of this. If you come from Afghanistan, you go back to Afghanistan. End of. This idea we can't send people to certain countries, all the false claims that people make about their own personal lives. I'm sorry, we're done. We're done. We've had enough. Andy Bell, Channel 5 News.
Thank you. Andy Bell, 5 News. You talked earlier about boats being towed back to France. You must know that's a very dangerous operation. Are you prepared to take the risk that a boat could overturn because a British Border Force boat or a Royal Navy boat has got involved, trying to tow it, maybe trying to push it? Is that a risk you are prepared to take?
Well, I didn't talk about boats being towed to France. I talked about boats being towed to Indonesia, pointing out that in the end was the way the Australians sorted it out. Look, you know, I want to make it very, very clear that the absolute, you know, if everything else was to fail, we would tow the boats back to France, which the last time I looked was a relatively civilised and safe country. But I believe if you put all the other measures in place, you won't need to do that. Simple as. And by the way, what is dangerous and what is causing loss of life is us having a sign effectively up on the White Cliffs of Dover saying everyone welcome. To our knowledge, there are 18 that have died so far this year. Nearly 50 died last year.
But that wouldn't be a British boat or ship getting involved in trying to turn that boat around. That's my point.
Well, I do not think, I tell you what, I really don't think that after 800 million quid that the French Navy should be escorting boats to the 12-mile line in the way that they currently are. Natasha Clark, LBC.
Hi, Mr. Farage. You said today that police need to be able to release as much information as possible about those potential offenders. So are you saying that they should, the police, in all cases, release the names, addresses and immigration status of people after they have been charged with an offence? Your critics will, of course, say that this is going to inflame community tensions. This could cause unrest on our streets. We are already seeing a very precarious situation. Is that not just going to make things far, far worse? Thank you.
What caused unrest on our streets after Southport last year was us not being told the status of the attacker. That led to crazy conspiracy theories spreading online. You know, so look, you know, I've made it perfectly clear through this press conference, and George understands this absolutely as well. You know, we do understand and respect the contempt of court rules. But, you know, I'm going to go back and quote just one more time. Jonathan Hall, KC, the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, a watchdog over this area, you know, who said in the wake of Southport, we should spell out the basic and sober facts. He also said that governments should stop hiding behind contempt of court rules. People need to be given reasonable truth. And, you know, we might not like the truth, but we can accept the truth. But to have masses of speculation as to what might have happened makes things, I think, far worse than they otherwise would be. Claire Ellicott, Daily Mail.
Thank you. Could you just set out your views on whether trans women should be on female prison wards? And also, do you agree with Trump's deadline for Putin? And do you think Putin should abide by it? Thank you.
Well, I think Donald Trump believed that his negotiating skills would enable him to get Mr. Putin to the table and strike a reasonable deal. Since that time, Putin has showed how completely, wholly unreasonable he is in every single way. So we'll see what happens with those negotiations. Well, when it comes to trans women in prisons, you know, isn't it interesting that we run our country with people who become ministers, who generally have absolutely no idea of the subject matter that they're talking about. I've personally never worked in a prison, so I can't answer it, but I think you'll find that the answer that you'll get from somebody who has worked in prisons at the highest possible level is, I think basically it's about risk assessment, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we all know what the law is. I'm not going to go back over that yet again. But to my mind, everybody who is in prison deserves to be treated with humanity and decency. And that includes female prisoners and it includes trans prisoners. You know, everything in the prison service is risk assessed. And I am sure that the prison service will tie itself up in knots over the trans issue, just like many other public sectors have. And as Nigel said earlier, you know, we are at the beginning, and that is something that we will need to speak about clearly.
Yeah, but in terms of the problems in prisons, it's a relatively small one.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Tenny Diver, Telegraph.
Thank you. Ms. Farage, Vanessa Fake said that the UK should build US-style supermax prisons. As I'm sure you know, they are the most expensive prisons to build and run, which is one of the reasons that we don't have them. Have you considered how we might afford to build and run them? Your costing document that you've released suggests costs of prison building are far smaller than that. And is there a danger here that you're making a lot of promises to voters that you couldn't possibly afford to?
No. We laid out very clearly a plan. This is week 3 of the campaign, and we laid out very clearly a plan. I was asked about the cost of that plan, to which I said, I think on the day, how can we afford not to do this? Now, the Supermax prisons, have we costed it? Have we thought it through? It's a debate. The point about this task force is we're starting a debate, and we'd rather like it to become a full public debate too.
Can I also say, I didn't say we should build Supermax prisons, I actually said a Supermax regime. There is a totally different thing, and converting part of our high security estate into a Supermax wing would be relatively easy.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed. Aubrey Allegretti from The Times.
Thank you. Hello. Sorry, hovering in the corner here. It's standing room only. Aubrey Allegretti from The Times. Can I just press you a little bit further on Natasha's question? She was asking whether police forces should be obliged to publish the details of people who've been arrested and charged. I think you were basically suggesting that you thought that was right, but can I just get your confirmation that you definitely think...
Yes, I absolutely think that they should, and I think, particularly given there's a pretty febrile atmosphere around these areas, particularly sexual assaults and rapes, you know, where the temperature on this debate has risen significantly. Yes, I do believe they should.
Thank you for that clarity. Can I just ask one more as well?
Go on then.
Thank you. You said that you wanted to detain all small boat arrivals.
Yeah.
Where are you planning to put them?
We're going to have to use military bases. We're going to have to move very, very quickly to do it. Believe me, we're not going to have this problem. Once people know that it's not a free trip coming into the United Kingdom, they will stop coming, and they'll stop coming within a fortnight. Right, Caitlin Doherty from PA.
Hi, I think it was Mr. Sutton mentioned prisoners being released after a certain period of their sentence, 40%, 50%. Can I take it from that under a reform government, all prisoners would serve 100% of
I think you're asking me to. I think you're asking us to put out an election manifesto. So last I understood, I think the election's 4 years away, and I think what you can see we're doing here is we're building a team of people with great experience in their areas. And I would argue that to have Vanessa, Colin, and Rupert on this platform with me today shows you that in terms of policy development, we want to go to people who've succeeded in those areas themselves, and you never know, we may even have ministers in the next government who have never been politicians in their lives but know the subject matter about which they speak.
Does Reform currently have a policy about whether prisoners will be able to serve any of their sentence on licence?
Well, we basically think people should serve their sentences, yes, otherwise what's the point of the whole thing? Right, let's go to Christian Calgie, Express.
Morning. Vanessa has said this morning that we need to be better with rehabilitation, but you've said that you'd send violent offenders to El Salvador who have a very different approach to...
nice try, but go on, keep
I
going.
just wanted to get a broad...
Do enjoy yourself.
Philosophical view. Are you carrot or stick when it comes to prisoners? And Vanessa, I wondered, obviously we're at the start of, as Nigel keeps saying, a policy review process, but could you talk a bit about the issue of Islamist influences within prisons and how big an issue that is and how you might start to deal with that?
Okay, Christian, perhaps you weren't at the last press conference. You missed it. Well, there you are then. I made it perfectly clear that when people make mistakes in life and get into trouble, that the absolute primary goal should be their rehabilitation. Absolutely. That is what we want to do. We don't want people repeat offending and finishing up in prison, you know, for the bulk of their adult lives. So actually, you know, it's both a carrot and stick, isn't it? It's to show first-time offenders that there is a better life, there is a better way. If we were able to perhaps encourage people, inspire people to learn new skills. But, you know, there comes a point, and I think Vanessa made that clear, where sometimes with people you can't, and society needs to be protected from them. Vanessa, would you talk about the rise of Islamism, please, in British prisons?
Yes, I think without a doubt there is a rise of Islamist gangs within prison, and it is very difficult to manage them. You know, at Wormwood Scrubs, as the head of security, I had to take the decision to split our Friday night or Friday afternoon service for Muslims in two, because we had about 400 prisoners that wanted to attend their service. And you know, it's a constant battle, because you know, we all know prisons have no spaces. So it's where once it was easy to transfer prisoners out to different prisons, it's not so easy now. And you know, I think that we have to be mindful. Yeah, there are a rise of Islamist gangs within our jails, and we have to deal with that, and deal with it short and sharp.
Thank you. Tim Shipman, Spectator.
I wasn't actually expecting that, Nigel. So.
Well, you're on the list. I mean,
can you talk to us about your impressions of the public reaction to all this? What sort of? I remember you saying a few months ago that you were getting less abuse on the streets. Are you now detecting a warmth over these issues towards you that you weren't detecting before? And have you noticed, now that these issues have turned to matters of sexual assault, that you're getting more women and mothers talking about it to you when you go out and about?
Yes is the answer to that, very, very clearly. And it was interesting, wasn't it, to see the protest, the very peaceful protest of the women dressed in pink that were outside Canary Wharf yesterday, protesting, I have to say, very peacefully, quite why the police seemed to think a Section 43 was necessary, and to prohibit them from going back within 28 days. And maybe it was the masked thugs from Antifa who perhaps they should have been focusing their attentions on. Just an observation, just a thought. But I do think one of the things that's happened over the course of the last few weeks is, without doubt, we're definitely seeing not just high-profile women coming to reform, and you've seen one or two of those on the stage here and in Wales over the course of the last few weeks. But I think generally out there, I think there is grave concern, particularly amongst mothers, about their teenagers, whether they can let them out. So yes, I think this is perhaps this issue has spoken a truth to people that they've been feeling increasingly for some time, and I think that maybe changes the complexion of how people view reform. You know, the sort of, when I came back into this last June, people regarded it as being a bit of a blokish party. Something to do with my reputation, I can't quite think why. But I think that's changing, and changing very rapidly, and this campaign is very much a part of that. Anna Gross, Financial Times.
I'll do it without this.
All right.
Have you received any communications from J.D. Vance or other members of the US administration saying they support your policy of repealing the Online Safety Act? And a second, if I may, will all reform-led councils block the use of HMOs to accommodate asylum seekers? Is that already a policy? Is it something that you're starting to do?
Yes, we were absolutely, all those councillors, all those nearly 700 councillors that were elected back on May the 1st this year, absolutely. And it's quite a debate, isn't it? Because whilst it's the hotels that have the visibility, and that's where the protests happen, in some ways the HMOs are even worse than the hotels, because you're
next door, they're over the road, you don't know where they are. And this is the problem, is that in Warwickshire, in the north of the county where I'm from, Nuneaton, Bedworth, we don't have a Margaret Hotel, but we've got loads of HMOs that are increasingly popping up. But in the south of the county, there's loads of Margaret Hotels. People have had enough. You know, like I said during the campaign, we have three things in Warwickshire reform: honesty, integrity and transparency. And when this come across my desk, I couldn't break away from my instincts. Transparency is the key to this. If you keep on and tell the people the truth, they understand and they know what to work with. This is the point. If we highlight them all, people can understand. The Home Office are telling Warwickshire Chief Constable, telling Warwickshire County Council, oh, we're not going to tell you where all the HMOs are. We're not going to tell you. We don't know where they are. That's dangerous. That's against safeguarding. As the Children and Family Portfolio holder, that's a huge problem for the children in Warwickshire. It's about safety. It's simple.
Yeah, and it's actually worth you talking to Sarah Pochin One of the big elements that came out of the Runcorn by-election was the HMO issue. Who would say, well, there's a house here and 10 or 15 people from a completely different culture have been put in this house, and they say they've been following our kids to school, and we're very, very scared. I recommend that you talk to her. As for the JD Vance, and I can't remember the answer to that. Oliver Harris, Politics UK.
Thank you. Good morning. Some 500,000 people have signed a parliamentary petition calling for the government to repeal the Online Safety Act. I wonder, one, what are your thoughts on that? And two, could you see any instrumental benefits of the Act in its current form, if any?
I'm going to call Zia Yusuf up to the platform. He has spent more time researching this and getting acquainted with this than probably most people in governmental positions.
Thanks, Nigel. Can we see any instrumental benefits within the Act? A few. Look, it's an Act of around 200 pages, and this is why Reform made the decision, Nigel made the decision that when he's the Prime Minister, we will have to repeal it, because the vast, vast majority of the Act are A, irrelevant to protecting children, B, unfit for purpose, and as Nigel's already articulated, in some cases actually do detriment to safety of children online. Let's talk firstly about the overreach, which Nigel alluded to earlier. Even if you were to be kind and say none of this was intentional, and the intention of the bill all along was to protect children, in the end you have to judge legislation by the outcomes that it delivers. The Act has been in force now for about a week or so. Look at the things that have been censored as a result of it. You've seen protests at migrant hotels in Leeds censored on social media. You've seen people trying to log into their Spotify accounts being unable to do so. Kids literally, this is true, trying to change the settings on their NVIDIA graphics cards being prevented from doing so. You've had, as Nigel said, historical accounts and biographies of Richard the Lionheart being censored online. You've had Reddit forums giving people help as to how to quit smoking, being censored. And you've seen, for example, transcript. I mean, if we want to talk about protecting children from predators, then you'll have to explain to me why Katie Lamb's speech, excoriating the cover-up of the grooming gangs to the shame of this country, where there's supposed to be parliamentary privilege. So, you know, I could go on and on and on. So the short answer is, of course, we care about the safety of children. Nigel cares more than anybody about it, but we have to take legislation seriously. And frankly, the last thing I'll say is, as someone who built a tech business, understands this stuff reasonably well, how the internet actually works, it is very clear that the people making this legislation haven't got the first clue about how the online world actually works.
Zia, thank you very much for that. We've got a few more. We've got Ava Evans from Politics Joe.
Hi, Nigel. Keir Starmer is reportedly seriously considering introducing digital ID to tackle immigration. Is that something you would support?
Yes, it's a Blairite idea. I'm sure that Tony Blair would have us all microchipped. No, I don't support it. I don't trust big government. If you want to see why my trust in government doesn't exist, just think about what's happened in the space of the last week, where they introduced legislation that they tell you is purely to protect children and actually is having a terrible effect on free speech and democracy. I would not trust this government with digital ID. I have to say I didn't particularly enjoy the vaccine passport phase that we lived through. And as for the argument, oh, it'll stop crime, it'll stop illegal immigration, it'll stop illegal working, well, I don't think digital ID will stop teenage girls being raped. I don't think digital ID will stop the drugs gangs. I don't think digital ID will stop illegal working. Frankly, what it's more likely to do is to impinge upon the law-abiding majority. Right, OK, we've got three more. Adam Cherry from Guido Fawkes.
Thank you. Can I just get your reaction to the news that the Labour Party is relying on analyses of Reform voters and profiling of Reform voters provided by Hope Not Hate, given that Hope Not Hate repeatedly refers to Reform as far right?
Yeah, which is moronic. And Labour are going to struggle. They're going to struggle to profile Reform voters. Do you know why? They are not only spread geographically, and didn't we rather prove that point in the recent Scottish Parliament by-election, we're not only spread geographically, but of all the parties, we have the greatest spread of age ranges, of people voting for us, of religions, ethnicities, and now almost exactly 50-50 male-female voters. So to profile your average Reform voter, well, they probably think we're all knuckle-draggers, but I'm afraid, I'm really sorry, but they're just wrong. OK, Will Hazel from the iPaper.
Hello, thank you. Vanessa Frake spoke about the desperate need for investment in the prison estate very powerfully. Is that consistent with the very significant tax cuts you're offering? And just on tax, I'm not sure if you've seen, but Neil Kinnock has urged Rachel Reeves to extend VAT to private healthcare in the same way that Labour did with
Brilliant.
schools. Could I get your reaction?
Oh, well, that Kinnock chap's marvellous, isn't he? Why don't we get everyone to emigrate? You know, the talk of wealth taxes. I mean, can you not see what's happening? There is an exodus from this country of high taxpayers. There is an exodus from this country of young people who are not yet big earners, but many of whom are the entrepreneurs of the future. I understand 54 schools have closed, private schools have closed this year already. Rather than, I would say this, rather than putting VAT on premiums that you pay to private healthcare, perhaps if we gave people a bit of tax relief on paying for private healthcare, we might just relieve the pressure off the National Health Service. So I think they've got this all completely the wrong way around. Last question, Jessica Elger from The Guardian.
Hi there, Nigel. Are you in any way concerned that the comments Mr. Finch made earlier might put a trial and a potential conviction at risk? And I'm not talking about the comments on about his immigration status, but about some of the terms he used to describe the case.
Well, I can imagine if I was leader of Warwickshire County Council and I was getting the level of distress from voters and residents that George is feeling, if that means that he was slightly emotional, well, do you know what? Good. Good. Perhaps we really do need to start actually really thinking and caring about protecting children. And that means these young men should not be free to walk our streets. We're not just talking here about protecting children, we genuinely intend to do it. Thank you very much indeed, everyone.